This episode explores sensitive historical topics, including violence and racist ideology, in order to examine the lasting impact of systemic racism in the American prison system. We strongly condemn racism and discrimination in all forms. Seth Ferranti here, your guide through the dark corners of the criminal underworld. As an outlaw filmmaker, author, and journalist, I've delved deep into the minds of gangsters, drug lords, and prison gangs. But my journey doesn't stop there. Let me take you on a thrilling ride as we explore the hidden stories and untold truths that lurk behind the prison walls.
No prison is free of danger, but few outsiders can comprehend the level of violence that prevails in prison because of the prison gangs. In this episode, we're going to take a rare glimpse into the dark and bloody world where the most violent criminals have fashioned their own rules for living and dying. The Aryan Brotherhood formed at San Quentin Prison in the California Department of Corrections in 1967 to protect white convicts from the predatory gangs that were taking root in the system, like the Black Guerrilla Family, La Nuestra Familia, and the Mexican Mafia. It was a volatile time in the United States, and this volatility was amplified 100 times over in the netherworld of chaos and violence, where it was go hard or check into the hole like a punk.
It's like the black area over there, the Norteño area over there, the white area over here, Indians over there.
What really got them originated was the white boys had to come together for protection purposes. They formed to take care of the whites in the California system because of the black prison gangs. It was a way for them to make money, a protection racket. The white supremacist group, which later adopted the moniker The Brand due to the shamrock or cloverleaf tattoo they used to signify membership, was made up mostly of prisoners with Irish, Nordic, and German backgrounds. Convicts from 1950s biker gangs like the Diamond Tooth and Bluebirds formed the crux of the newly formed organization. The inmates consolidated under a white supremacist banner to watch each other's backs, show unity, and handle their business on the yard. Representing their people, they made sure that none of their own were exploited on their watch. By 1975, the gang was prospering inside the fences of the CDC, making power moves, calling shots, and holding it down.
You told us we were free. Well then, show us that we're free. You told us that there is justice, equality for all in this country. Well then, stick to your word and let us see the justice and equality for all.
The 1960s were a radical time in America, with the Black Power movement in full swing and minorities marching and demanding civil rights. Behind the walls of the CDC, where blacks, whites, and Mexicans were crammed together like sardines in a fishbowl, racial tensions were definitely over the top. George Jackson, credited with founding the Black Guerrilla Family, penned the renowned prison memoir Soledad Brother, detailing his experiences within the prison system. The book also describes instances of conflict within the prison, likely fueled by the experiences of systemic racism and oppression faced by many people of color. Jackson himself, as reflected in his writings, held strong critiques of the prison system and the broader societal structures that perpetuated these inequities. That mentality spilled over into the prisons, where race wars raged on unabated. The cauldron of hate created an atmosphere of tension at San Quentin, which ignited the disputes that evolved into an all-out melee that erupted throughout the whole California system. The end result was the rise of the Big Four prison gangs, divided along strict racial lines, which provided a measure of safety for their members. Another famous author, Edward Bunker, a white con who went Hollywood when he got out, wrote about life in the CDC in his book, The Miseducation of a Felon, which documented how the whites came together to hold their own. Along with the other race-based gangs, the Brand took their place in prison legend and lore as one of the most fierce and violent gangs to ever grace a California main line.
The Aryan Brotherhood wasn't for everyone. Exclusiveness was the rule. They were very selective in who they let join. Choosing prospective members took a great deal of scrutiny. You can't just sign up or join the brand. They had to pick you to join. For example, they had rules. Whites were not allowed to eat, drink, or even share a cigarette with anyone outside their race in prison. All interactions with others were to be kept on a need-only basis. Their philosophy was keep it white.
Blood in, blood out is what it's called. And usually it's law enforcement that coins that term. There is no oath taken, there's no loyalty oath. The idea was that if you wanted to become a member, that you had to get your bones.
The brand's motto was blood in, blood out, meaning once you spilled blood in order to join, the only way you were leaving was in a body bag. If you wanted to join, all you had to do was to brutally take down or at least inflict serious harm on an inmate of another gang. The AB offered an exclusive membership to only the most vicious, cunning, and loyal convicts, the elite of the white convicts. The guidelines for membership were strictly enforced. The Aryan Brotherhood existed as a brotherhood of soldiers on the front lines of the prison race wars. They conditioned their bodies, minds, and souls to go full blast at a moment's notice. With their thick bull necks, massive forearms, knit caps pulled low over their eyes, and walrus-like mustaches, they resemble Viking warriors or Old West outlaws, an image cultivated to install fear, necessary in the environment they found themselves in.
I seen all these bombed out buildings, all this violence. What are you doing? This is your neighborhood. These are your people.
St. Louis is often described as one of the most divided cities in the country.
The opioid crisis is the biggest public health emergency.
Are solved with a gun.
The number of homicides in St. Louis this year passed 200.
This is about making a human connection.
You have to be able to see that there is some fight down the road.
I wanted to go where nobody else will, where everybody's scared to go. Show that God hasn't forgotten.
What about the nights when the pistol's getting popped? Is you there? You telling me to quit? You might as well. It ain't working. Man, I can't do that, man. Your camera's off now. This real shit. What's the point in having faith if you're not going to take a risk, if you're not going to take a chance, if you're not going to put yourself in harm's way for the sake of a greater good? What's the point? Well, you can tell it's Friday night. Y'all, let's have a word of prayer real quick. Lord, we praise you. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We thank you. I've seen this city, and I've seen the spirit of these people, and I've watched these folk fight for their neighborhoods, street by street, house by house. I start to say I hate to be so preachy, but I am a preacher. But anyway, we're just so blessed. Say hi, Reverend Brown.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
A chance to see an AV put in real work was bigger than watching the Super Bowl for those inside the belly of the beast. And the brand didn't disappoint. They killed by bludgeon, prison-made knives, whatever they could get their hands on. They killed blacks, whites who didn't do what they said, and even their own members who got out of line. These dudes were vicious. They were violent, disciplined, and fearless. A prison official's worst nightmare.
They don't hide from the police. They're doing life sentences. Even if their guy was wrong, they ride with him. They don't fight fair. They'll all jump on you. Shit, they're like the Musketeers, all for one and one for all. They got makeshift sharp objects all over the yard, easy access. The AB's leaders read Machiavelli, Nietzsche, Sun Tzu, Tolkien, and the old standby, Mein Kampf. But the AB long ago subordinated its racist ideology to the acquisition of money. The leadership became much more interested in power than race and started muscling in on the gambling, extortion, and dope rackets. As part of its bid to exert control over these prison industries, the AB adopted a structure in the 80s similar to the Italian mafia, with a three-man council and a formal hierarchy that sent orders down the chain of command. Prison is where these guys live. We only punch the clock, a correctional officer says. If you are going to spend the rest of your life in prison, why not be an AB member? They live like kings. They were brutal warlords that maintained their position with an influx of drugs and unrequited violence. The brand eventually ran much of the drug trafficking, gambling, and prostitution behind the walls and plenty more on the outside. The gang operated as a full-fledged criminal enterprise. In the federal system, they established ties with jailed mafia crime bosses, associates from other gangs like the Dirty White Boys, Low Riders, and Mexican Mafia do their bidding. They flood every compound they're on with H, shipping the proceeds back to California to be dispersed between other jailed members and leaders of the gang.
The two commissions, one in California and the other in the feds, call the shots for the brand. Though never vast in numbers, the AB make up for it with their violent acts, which have led to a fearsome reputation. Their far-flung associates that number in the hundreds exert power on whatever prison compound they're on, trying to further the influence of the gang and get money.
Every day of the year, 20,000 men and women are jailed in California state prisons, 25,000 in county jails. Hundreds of millions are spent yearly to run California's jails and prisons, the largest system in the entire country.
In 1989, they built Pelican Bay. In 1988, they built Corcoran to take back control of the California prison system from all the prison gangs. And they didn't really succeed because the brand uses others to do their bidding on the main lines. In the feds, they have all the power of the brand locked up in ADX Florence, Colorado. Prison officials think that if they take the head, then the body will die, meaning the rest of these gangs will fall apart when they lock up the leaders. But the brand has been around a long time, so they have a lot of influence. Overall, they have slowly been losing control in both the state and federal prison system due to new cases, infighting, and age. A lot of the leaders are dinosaurs. On August 28, 2002, AUSA Greg Jessner indicted virtually the entire leadership of the gang. The indictment reached back 20 years, spanning 3 decades and 32 murders. 40 members were indicted of federal racketeering charges in a 140 10-count indictment. The majority of the gang members were already doing life sentences, so 23 of them were eligible for the death penalty. This is a homicidal organization, Jessner announced. I suspect they kill more than the mafia. They may be the most murderous criminal organization in the United States. A main component of the case was the ongoing race war with the D.C. blacks in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The race wars in the federal system started on November 22, 1981, when the body of Robert M. Chappelle, a member of the D.C. blacks, was found outside of his cell at USP Marion. Thomas Terrible Tom Silverstein was the assailant, and Chappelle's shocking end worried Bureau officials who thought it might spark a war, which it certainly did.
Forget everything you know about America's war on drugs. Where it started, when it started, and most importantly, who was involved. This is the untold history of America's original drug lords.
I was like the white dude in prison that was writing books about the African-American gangsters. I'd ask about these guys, like these street legends, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that dude's on B Block. And I'd be like, what? I started going to these guys, and I started saying, hey man, like, let me tell your story. Like, you hear people in the media all the time where they write books and, you know, they're like, oh, they misquoted me. You can't afford to misquote anybody in it. Especially if you're a white dude writing books about African-American dudes. I mean, you could just imagine.
You know, when I first went in the feds, it was the height of the war on drugs. I went in '93, you know, that was crazy, but mostly they were locking up all African Americans, you know, mostly crack dealers, you know, from the crack epidemic and the crack era, and a lot of Hispanics. So, you know, you come from a society where white people are the majority, and you go into prison where white people are the minority. So, you know, it's a big difference, man. It's, you know, it was like culture shock for me. So, you know, and I just went into medium high. So I can imagine some of these young white kids like me going into these high level penitentiaries, you know, if they got a life sentence or they have violent crimes. And then, you know, they have to get with these things, because they have to get with these people, because on the yard, you know, the white boy shot callers, the AB, whatever gang is dominant, they call the shots for the white boys. You got to be in the white boy car. That's your race. It's the only choice you have.
The prison could be really racial, right? But since I played sports, you know, I fucked with all the black dudes, I fucked with all the Spanish dudes, you know, of course I fuck with all the white people, because that's my people anyhow, that's my tribe in there. So, but, you know, by doing these administrative remedies and where it was like a hustle, like my own people, they couldn't knock me, you know, because before, like, you know, in prison, like if you're helping a black dude or you're helping a Spanish dude, your own people are, you know, your own people are the first who are going to say something. And they're going to be like, yo, why you fucking with these dudes, blah, 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 whatever. And I'd be like, look, dude, they're paying me to do this shit. I mean, money's green, so motherfuckers don't care. So, you know, that also gave me like a little leeway to what I eventually started doing with my writing, because I did it firsthand. You know, I figured out, okay, well, if it's a hustle, motherfuckers can't really say shit about racial stuff, you know what I'm saying? But like the white boy gang, since I'm white, they would come like try to check me. They'd be like, hey man, like why are you writing this shit? You know, what's up, man? You like love blacks or something? You're writing this shit about black dudes, you know? And I'd be like, look, dude, I make money from this shit, man. I'd be like, when you get some heroin, you sell it to black dudes or whoever, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh wait, same shit, dude. It's my hustle. Fuck off.
The Federal Bureau of Prisons have built an even more secure and updated Supermax at Florence, Colorado. The Supermax is a controversial institution. Its critics argue that it makes already violent men more violent. Its supporters argue that such men have proved unmanageable in any other conditions.
The Baron is known as the brain of the Aryan Brotherhood and has been a long-time leader. He is responsible for much of their organizational structure and the formation of the three-man commissions in the California and federal prison systems. Mills is a tactical and innovative gang leader whose word is law. He isn't afraid to get busy himself when necessary, but is equally adept at delegating and passing orders down the line. He became involved with the AB in San Quentin prison in the late 1960s after growing up in Northern California, and quickly rose through their ranks as he returned to prison frequently as a young man, finally getting his first life sentence for the near decapitation of a fellow prisoner. He now resides in the Bureau of Prisons Supermax facility in Florence, Colorado, serving his time in 24-hour lockdown with no human contact. The Hulk is a massive specimen of a man who benches 500 pounds and is known as the Baron's right-hand man and chief enforcer. He is part of the three-man commission that controls activity in the federal prison system and was the shot caller who sent out the order to reignite the race war at USP Lewisburg in 1997, leading to the deaths of 2 DC blacks, the Brand's arch-enemies in the Bureau of Prisons. Up until the massive 2006 racketeering indictment against the Aryan Brotherhood, the Hulk actually was scheduled to get out of prison after multiple decades inside. He now sits alongside his general, the Baron, at ADX Florence, doing natural life in total isolation with hardly any recreation time and restricted and limited correspondence. Terrible Tom was from Long Beach, California, and entered the California Youth Authority at the age of 14 for juvenile delinquency. He was sent to San Quentin at the tender age of 19, and when he was paroled from that short bid, he quickly jumped back into a life of crime and was sentenced to 15 years for an armed robbery charge and sent to USP Leavenworth, an AB stronghold, in 1977. He got involved with the Brand and murdered an inmate to make his bones. He also got a life sentence for the crime. But Terrible Tom's murdering rampage had just started. The state-raised kid had murder on his mind, but the Bureau of Prisons had something in store for him. They developed a special isolation cell just for him. He was a man considered so dangerous by the BOP that he was totally cut off from the outside world and human contact.
While there is no designation higher than Supermax, officials at Leavenworth have their own term for their handling of Tommy Silverstein: supreme punishment. Behind those 3 steel doors, the only sound he can hear is the buzz of the fluorescent lights that are never turned off. Even though Silverstein told Pete Early that he is getting meaner, there is one consolation. Tommy Silverstein won't be eligible for parole until November 2nd in the year 2095.
You know, in the movie American History X, you know, Edward Norton plays like this white supremacist dude, and he goes into prison, and when he first goes in, you know, he kind of flashes his Nazi tattoo, you know, like he's a badass. And, you know, I've seen stuff like this happen, you know, in prison during my years. Like, dudes would come in, they got all these tattoos, but these dudes are not in these gangs, you know, so they're gonna rip that tattoo off, man. They're gonna get some acid, they're gonna burn that tattoo up, they're gonna make you cover it up. That's just how these dudes roll. You gotta be put into the gang by them. You gotta be tattooed by their tattoo artists in there. You can't just come in claiming something that you're not, or just because you have these beliefs. They don't care.
The main tattoo of the Aryan Brotherhood is the distinctive shamrock clover that made members get to signify that they are official and legitimate members. The shamrock is the brand that gives them the name they go by in the pen, the Brand.
The truth of the matter is that the Aryan Brotherhood is not as powerful as they once were, but they have spawned imitators, and in prison systems all over the nation, the AB has members and associates. There's also many state prison gangs who have adopted the name Aryan Brotherhood. This gives the impression that there's one large organization or brotherhood of white prisoners who all belong to the same gang that is all governed by one body and has members in nearly every state and federal prison throughout the United States. But this is totally false. This concludes this episode of Seth Ferranti's True Crime. Be sure to like and subscribe, and join us again for more in-depth stories on some of the most notorious gangs and gangsters from within prison walls to the streets of every city.